All right, Tim Bontemps is with us now, NBA writer for ESPN, covering the Sixers Heat series this week at least. Great to have him on today. We will get into a bunch of stuff as far as the playoffs go. Tim, Stephen Strom here. How you doing? It must be nice to be down here in the sun in Miami.
It's not bad. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Let's start here with the series. What's been the most impressive thing that you've seen so far just from this Miami Heat team?
Well, look, I mean, the Heat have all season been able to produce big-time results while having a rotating cast of characters on and off the court, right, because of injuries and the fact that they've been able to roll along and get, as of now, 3 straight wins without Kyle Lowry, very likely to get a fourth in a few hours here tonight against the Sixers is certainly the latest example of that, right? Now, obviously, they're playing a pretty disjointed Atlanta Hawks team in the first round. They're playing a Philadelphia 76ers team without one of the best players in the league in Joel Embiid, so they're taking care of business. But at the same time, this team did not play very well in Monday's game and ground out a win. And I expect them to play a lot better in game 2 and get another one. So, the Heat are kind of doing what they always do, which is being always prepared for whatever comes at them and playing pretty well.
So we're recording here on a Wednesday. So unfortunately, we don't know what the result of game 2 is, but we know game 1, the Sixers started out with DeAndre Jordan at the 5. They started to move to Paul Reed. They went small, found some success, especially with Tobias Harris at the 5, went back to DeAndre Jordan for the second half. Let's just talk about Doc Rivers. What's the adjustments? If it isn't small ball, it could be something with Harden. What are some of the adjustments that you think Doc Rivers needs to do to try to make this series close?
I don't think there's a lot of things that Doc really can do with this current iteration of his roster. I mean, as you saw in game 1, Paul Reed can be productive when he's out there, but he got 5 fouls in 13 minutes, and he'll probably get 6 fouls in 16 minutes. So, we're only going to have him for a few minutes a game. The Sixers probably should try to play Charles Bassey, their rookie big, earlier in the year, but they didn't really give him any much of an opportunity to play. It's hard to throw him out there in a moment like this when he's played 170 regular season minutes. So they're probably going to have to try to buy some time with DeAndre again. He was a little better in the second half. Hopefully, Doc Rivers has said he wants that play to carry over. But really, this team has to hit shots on the perimeter. They went 6 for 34 from 3. Just isn't good enough without Joel Embiid. And they're going to have to get more from James Harden in particular. Tobias Harris has played the best 2 or 3 weeks of basketball he's played in his whole Sixers tenure recently. He was great on Jimmy Butler in game 1, really shut him down. I think he scored 27 or 28 points, 11 for 18 shooting, was efficient, was attacking, was aggressive. He was great. But James Harden was supposed to be, a co-superstar with Joel Embiid, and he has not been that since the moment he arrived in Philadelphia. And, if they're going to win this game tonight and really have a chance to win this series, if Joel can come back in Philadelphia, they're going to need James Harden to be better than he has been to this point. And it's just unclear if he's going to be able to produce that kind of performance.
Tim Bontemps with us now. 20 years from now, when someone comes up to you and says, Tim, tell me what PJ Tucker was like when he played, how would you describe his game?
I don't think anyone will be asking me that question, but but PJ's a heck of a player, man. You look at the way his career has progressed from being a guy that came out of Texas, had to go overseas, was bouncing around in Europe with a bunch of teams, grinds his way back over here to the States, and has turned himself into a really elite role player, right? A guy who can guard several positions on the court, has become a really good corner 3-point shooter, really maximizes his limited physical tools on the court. And, was a big part of those great Houston Rockets teams with James Harden in Houston. Was obviously instrumental in Milwaukee winning the championship last year, played a critical role for the Bucks, and has slotted right in just as I expected he would with the Heat. I saw the Heat in Philly earlier this season, and I was talking to Eric Spoelstra about the addition of Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker, and he was just really excited about having a couple of guys that walked in and immediately understood what the Heat are about. And I think you've seen that throughout the year, and certainly looking ahead to a likely conference finals against either Boston or Milwaukee. For Miami, they're going to need PJ Tucker to be guarding, either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Giannis Antetokounmpo or Chris Middleton. I mean, he's going to have his hands full as usual on the perimeter, guarding the best guys on the other team and working his tail off every game.
All right, we'll move away here from the Miami Heat. I saw a tweet. ESPN says its ratings for the first round of the NBA playoffs were the highest since 2014. That's up 28% from last year. And the obvious is, no LeBron James. Why do you think the ratings are up so much this year?
I think it's a combination of people are getting back to normal. The schedule's back to normal. So I think there's some excitement about that. I think we've had some really entertaining series, right? You had Grizzlies Wolves with John Morant and Anthony Edwards kind of really emerging as stars. You had the Sixers. You have big name teams like the Celtics Nets series, Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum and Kyrie Irving. I mean, that was a huge draw. The Phoenix Suns got in a little bit of trouble as a 1 seed, right? So there was some intrigue with that. So there was a lot of star power. The Golden State Warriors are back. That certainly helps. The Warriors are a real juggernaut. So you put all that stuff together, and it created a situation where the ratings are good. But I just think in general, the league is in a really good place from a talent perspective. There's a lot of talent in the league, a lot of young, exciting talent, guys like Ja, like Ant-Man, Luka Doncic that are starting to emerge and become, the new faces of the league. And I think the fact that LeBron isn't in the playoffs and Kevin Durant's already out of the playoffs, there's a lot of excitement about what's going on. Is a very good sign for where the league is headed.
Tim, I noticed this in the first series, the Nets and the Nets and Celtics, just the physicality. And growing up with my father was a huge NBA guy. All he talked about the last couple of years is how the league has changed so much. But I feel like from a physicality standpoint, specifically in that Nets Celtics series, I thought it jumped off the screen just how the refs were allowing players to really play, get into guys, feel guys. Have you noticed that? And do you think that this is a better watch for fans?
Well, I think that's generally how it is in the playoffs. I think the difference between what it is now and what it was 20 years ago is, like when the Heat and Knicks were playing in the late 90s, I mean, everybody was juiced up and there was just it was kind of like semi-trucks colliding all the time, right? I mean, that's why the games were ugly to watch. I mean, the league has been able to transition away from that to a place where now these guys are covering more ground than they ever have before, right? I mean, the Heat are a good example of that. They're changing defenses every possession. They're flying around trying to cover gaps. And, that Celtics series, like you mentioned, that was a really physical series because the Celtics got up in the Nets on every possession and made it really hard on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving to get where they wanted to go and do what they wanted to do. So I think that's always been the case, I think, in the playoffs, but I think it just looks different now because you have the court spaced out so much. You have guys having to cover way more ground and move around a lot more defensively than they ever had before. So, but yeah, I think you've always seen in the playoffs, the game gets a little tougher, a little more physical. I think all that stuff, sort of translates, but there's no question that the idea that the league is less physical now, I think is, overblown when you look at just how much energy and effort these guys expend on a nightly basis. Like you go back and watch highlights of games in the 80s, there's a lot of guys standing around. Like it's just it's not the same product as it is now. It's a lot, and I think it could be part of the reason why you see a lot more injuries now, right? Because you have to work a lot harder every possession to get through the game.
Tim Bontemps with us. 2 quick ones. How much does coaching matter this time of the year?
Matters a lot. I mean, obviously what ultimately matters is talent. I think most people would say Nick Nurse is a better in-game coach than Doc Rivers, but in the first round, the Sixers had Joel Embiid and James Harden and Tyrese. They had a lot more talent than the Raptors, and especially with Fred VanVleet being banged up. And so you can only scheme so much if your team isn't good enough. But certainly having your team prepared to play, knowing where guys need to be, being able to put guys in positions to succeed, it's a huge part of winning in the playoffs. And it's why the Heat have had a lot of success with Eric Spoelstra, is one of the best coaches in the league.
Finish this sentence for me. The Boston Celtics win this series versus Milwaukee
if they continue to play the way they did in game 2. I think game 1 was a pretty classic example of a team that had played a pretty inferior opponent in the first round, to your point, that was used to controlling the game physically, right, from game to game. That the Nets were not offering much resistance in that area. Then they go up against the Bucks, who smacked them in the mouth and played physical. And Giannis Antetokounmpo is a different animal. And so you deal with all of that, and you kind of have to recalibrate and adjust and take a step back. And I thought the Celtics did that in game 2. I think they'll continue to do that in this series. I thought the winner of that series was going to win the championship for a while now, and I thought it was going to be the Bucks. The Chris Middleton injury flipped that around for me to the Celtics, and I expect, we'll see. It's series shifts back to Milwaukee. It's going to be interesting to see if Boston can get one there after Milwaukee got game 1. But I think you saw in game 2, even without Marcus Smart, Celtics have, to me, one of the best defenses I've ever seen, certainly in the modern era. To your point about that series against Brooklyn. And I think without Middleton out there, I just don't think there's a lot of options for Milwaukee. And I think the Celtics have a lot of things to throw at Giannis. And I think if they continue to play with that aggression they had in game 2, I think they're going to be all right.
All right, Tim, I appreciate you joining me. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Tim Bontemps. Does a fantastic job, NBA writer for ESPN. I'll see you at the arena tonight. Thank you again for carving out some time. It's always appreciated.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.